Hello everybody, we are Uncover the Earth, a group of 4 students at Michigan State University who are climate change activists, and in the next 20 minutes or so, we hope that you learn about the current climate change issue that faces countries in the world. In this documentary, you will learn about the vulnerabilities and opportunities that come with climate change, the history of Venezuela's economy and fossil fuel usage, along with the lifestyle and how deforestation affects the population, how Venezuela is involved in the UNFCCC and Kyoto, and our recommendations for the future to help save Venezuela. Climate change is a serious problem, and we hope that you join us in working to reduce CO2 emissions. One vulnerability is that the sea level is rising. Coastal areas are being flooded, and people who live along the coast, like Warreo River people and business owners, will be affected. The Warreo River people will be displaced from their homes after living near the Orinoco Delta for hundreds of years. The flooding of salt water into their delta will cut their water supply tremendously. There are also ecological aspects to this vulnerability. This flooding affects the ecosystems of catfish and piranhas. Socially, like I said, many people are going to be displaced from their homes. Another vulnerability is that the drier climate may lead to a loss in agriculture. There will be a desertification across the country, and farmers will be affected, along with the people who rely on farms for their main source of food. Socially, there will not be enough food to support the population, and farmers will lose their farms and businesses due to lack of nutrients to grow crops in the soil. Venezuela could also be facing an economic downfall because of a decrease in oil consumption. Venezuela's economy relies heavily on the exportation of oil. Many people are switching to greener means of energy because of the impacts of climate change. People who work in the oil industry will be affected, as well as the many consumers in the country. People may have to invest in other means of transportation, like a bike or maybe a transit system. A decrease in oil production will force Venezuela to open new businesses to keep the economy balanced. While there are many vulnerabilities, there are also opportunities that come with climate change. The warmer temperatures could lead to an increase in tourism. Spring breakers and summer vacationers would love to see a South American country if the weather is warm. This would help businesses on the coast and even throughout the country if people go inland. Another opportunity is moving towards eco-friendly energy, like wind farms and thermoelectric power plants. These forms of energy will decrease CO2 emissions and hopefully provide better air quality. This opportunity goes hand in hand with the vulnerability of reducing oil production, where the economy may be negatively affected. Ultimately, this would lead to a healthier Venezuela. Lastly, there is a group of people in Venezuela who have started the Tree Mission program. The organization planted 45 million trees in 6 years to reverse deforestation. This program spreads awareness for climate change in the country, and their efforts allow the government to grow and take its natural course. The Tree Mission program, like Uncover the Earth, educates people to respect life and recognize that climate change is happening. Amphibians will be on the brink of extinction because of climate change. The rising temperatures are spreading a deadly fungus which complicates reproduction in amphibians. 60 to 70% of amphibians are actually in critical danger of being extinct. In Venezuela, amphibians are the canaries in a coal mine. In other words, they are very sensitive to the slightest changes in the environment, which hopefully is a warning for the human population. The extinction of amphibians would interfere with the natural processes of the ecosystem. It would then be detrimental to all organisms in the area. Another opportunity would be warmer sea temperatures. This goes hand in hand with tourism by attracting more people from outside of the country and attracting more people within Venezuela to go to the coast. Thus, local businesses will benefit. Before we go into the history of Venezuela, we'll have a quick commercial break, and I'll leave you with this fun fact about Venezuela. The world's tallest waterfall is located in Venezuela. What is it called? A. Niagara Falls, B. Victoria Falls, C. Angel Falls, or D. Red River Falls.
And the answer to the fun fact question is Angel Falls. We are now going to begin talking about the history of Venezuela's economy and fossil fuel usage, and then end with a talk about the lifestyle of Venezuelans and how deforestation has impacted the population. We are going to start off by talking about the Meso-Indian period. This period happened until about the 15th century. During this time, they used crude oil and petroleum seeps for medicinal uses and caulking their canoes. They didn't realize how important these substances would become someday. The Spanish eventually colonized Venezuela in the 16th century. and the economy blossomed by raising livestock and farming. The huge oil deposits that were just under their feet had not been discovered yet. In the 18th century, the economy's large moneymaker switched from livestock to cocoa beans. During this time, Simón Bolívar fought for South American independence along with another man named José Páez. They were victorious on June 24, 1821. After the Industrial Revolution began, the first major oil well called Zumac 1 was discovered on April 15, 1914. Many foreign oil companies were jealous about all the oil, so they came over to try and get on the action. During World War I, the oil industry began to slow down a lot because it became way too expensive to transport the necessary machinery for drilling. In 1943, however, the economy began to pick back up, and Standard Oil made a deal with Venezuela regarding the petroleum gas industry. It was a landmark event that created the 50-50 principle. Finally, in early 1976, Venezuela nationalized their oil industry. This helped out their economy immensely. Between the years of 1950 and 1980, Venezuela's economy was considered the strongest in South America due to the exportation of oil. After Venezuela's economy became solely based on oil, they began to contribute a ton to climate change. As of now, Venezuela is the world's fifth largest exporting oil country. Between 1908 and 1940, it has been said that the Venezuelan oil industry was born. When Zumac 1 was founded, it opened up a huge door for the economy. However, fossil fuels were still being burned prior to Zumac's discovery. In 1913, an estimated 4 metric tons of carbon were released. That number is extremely small compared to how much they released in 2011, which was 51,491 metric tons. While this number seems extremely large, it is relatively small compared to the amount of carbon released in the U.S., which was 1,446,842 metric tons, and China, which was 2,459,645 metric tons. The population lives in poverty, which makes them extremely vulnerable to climate change because they don't have the necessary equipment to adapt to this changing climate. 93% of the population lives more towards the northern and urban parts of the country. Many urban areas such as Caracas, which is the capital of Venezuela, are located near the coast, which also makes these populations vulnerable to climate change due to the rising sea levels. Venezuela has been said to have the second highest homicide rate in the world, and it can become even worse if resources are low due to climate impact. With oil being so close, the car usage in Venezuela has increased. A gallon of oil is extremely cheap at only around 8 cents per gallon, which allows people to drive a lot more in that country. Lastly, we are going to talk about deforestation. The current rate of deforestation is 2.1%, which is considered relatively high. The southernmost part of Venezuela contains the Amazon rainforest, where a lot of deforestation has occurred. This forest is very diverse, so when it is cut down, many habitats are destroyed. Cattle ranching, however, is said to be the largest contributor of deforestation in Venezuela. Mining and tourism has also caused some deforestation in the country. On the flip side, one positive thing regarding climate change is that it helps the plants and trees flourish. This, however, can cause many wood industries to cut down the trees vital to the ecosystems. The Tree Mission program was founded to reverse the negative effects of deforestation by planting 45 million trees in only 6 years. This program made Venezuelans aware about what CO2 emissions are doing to the world. The planting of trees will allow organisms to thrive by creating habitats in them. This organization educates people to have respect for life and the environment around them. We are now going to take a quick commercial break, but before we do that, I'm going to leave you with a fun fact regarding Venezuela's sports scene. What is Venezuela's most popular sport?
Commercial break. The answer to the last fun fact question is baseball. Now we'll be talking about Venezuela's involvement in the UNFCCC and Kyoto. Venezuela's first involvement in the UNFCCC came around 1992. Venezuela has been very involved and believes that the climate change needs to be addressed. Even the president of Venezuela, Hugo Chavez, believes that we need to change the system, not the climate. Developed countries need to start taking responsibility in their involvement in climate change. Venezuela's involvement in the UNFCCC was when it signed the convention in 1992 and ratified it in 1994. On February 18, 2005, Venezuela ratified the Kyoto Protocol. Their goals involve having developed countries decrease greenhouse gas emissions. Venezuela is an oil-producing country, but its greenhouse emissions are minimal. Compared to countries such as the United States, who produce 35% of the world's greenhouse gases, Venezuela only produces 0.48%. Venezuela does not support the proposal of capturing and storing carbon dioxide in geologic formations and believe that it should not be included in the CDM. Compared to other countries such as the United States, who produce 5,270 million metric tons of carbon dioxide, Venezuela only produced 185 million metric tons of carbon dioxide. Even though Venezuela is a huge oil producer, they put less carbon dioxide in the air compared to other oil-producing countries. Venezuela is trying to do a lot to help with climate change. For example, Venezuela, along with other countries, are calling out high greenhouse emitting countries such as the United States. In addition, in 2014, Venezuela hosted the social pre-COP. Venezuela invited 130 activist groups to create the Margarita Declaration. In 2015, Venezuela submitted their intended nationally determined contribution at the COP21 in Paris. At this convention, Venezuela promised to reduce their emissions by 20% by the year 2030. This is quite a challenge for Venezuela since it's so dependent on oil. Venezuela is one of the main exporters of oil in the world. It relies on oil but has moved to more renewable energy sources such as hydroelectric power. Venezuela will still have to use non-renewable sources until sustainable energy projects are complete. There are many vulnerable populations that are affected by climate change in Venezuela. First, people who live on the coast are highly affected. They are at risk of losing their homes due to sea levels rising. This is caused by the polar ice caps melting. The foundation of major cities and transportation will be endangered if the sea levels continue to rise. Their economy can also be negatively impacted due to the possibility of businesses flooding around the coast. Women are another group that are harmfully impacted. Women act as hunters and gatherers for their families. This allows them to the possibility of being exposed to diseases and harsh conditions. For example, women have to go out and get water for their families in poorer regions of Venezuela. The water has the possibility of being contaminated from fertilizers and pesticides from farming. Women are also more likely to be laid off than men from oil industry jobs. Women also lack representation in the government. This negatively affects them because they are unable to explain their wants and needs to the government. Before we go into the recommendations portion of this documentary, we will have a quick commercial break. But before I let you go, I will leave you with another fun fact question about Venezuela. Here we go. Venezuela's name comes from the Italian word Venezuela, that literally means Piccolo Venezia, which means what?
Venezuela got its name. If you selected Little Venice, you are correct. The recommendations Uncover the Earth has for Venezuela, we're hoping that Venezuela will soon utilize the renewable energy sources that are close to them. There are multiple renewable sources Venezuela can use in this process. Hydroelectric power, for instance, can be used because part of Venezuela is along the coast of the Caribbean Sea. The use of hydroelectric power can help those situated on the coastline. This would occur and also help jobs because they would be created and they would draw in more individuals along the coast. Wind energy is yet another source that could potentially generate energy along the coast. Along with renewable energy, another suggestion is to cut back on oil consumption. Although Venezuela exports oil, if they were to reduce their consumption and focus on renewable sources, this could cause the nation to become a role model in changing their energy usage. Other countries could look to Venezuela for guidance and give tips on how to improve their energy practices. These recommendations do, however, come with a cost. This cost can be looked at through a cost-benefit analysis format. The primary cost would come from the reduction of oil consumption
and production. Although this would limit their greenhouse gas emissions, they would still have to utilize those non-renewable sources when transferring to renewable sources. This could cause the government to be threatened because people are losing jobs, but they can look to more affordable ways to produce energy with renewable sources. We would also hope that the nation would decide to research renewable sources, even though it would be costly to start. Over the long run, the prices would eventually go down because we are no longer having to use oil as a main source of energy. Because of the location of Venezuela, solar power is another type of renewable source that they can use. Another analysis that can be done is for social concerns. People are worried that the wind farms are going to create a large eyesore to the public and could eventually affect tourism. Our recommendation is to have hydroelectric power if they're concerned with that affecting their economy. We can ensure with them that they will help their economy by providing jobs and other benefits, even if the wind farms do create some of an eyesore. They are able to put the wind farms in more remote areas, but that also faces challenges when having to provide energy to sources that are farther away. Although we hope that these recommendations will affect the general public, they also have an influence on the vulnerable populations within Venezuela. The Rio River people have salt water beginning to flood into their areas that contain fresh water. This then affects them directly as they need the fresh water to survive, and they have no influence on how the salt water is affecting the water that they currently drink. With that recommendation of using more renewable sources, they'll have a better chance of being able to stay in their native lands, and they'll have a better chance of saving their fresh water supply, which they clearly rely heavily on. The renewable energy sources will not produce as much CO2 emissions, which have been caused to link to global warming. With the Earth heating up less, that means that the polar ice caps are no longer melting, and that gives the slower rate of rising sea levels. Our recommendations could potentially save the indigenous people from being displaced from their homes. A final group that we thought our recommendations would affect would be the coastal population. Turning to better and more renewable forms of energy would actually benefit the coastal population. There would be hydroelectric power and wind power generated near the coastline, which means that their energy would be coming from renewable sources. If they use those renewable sources, there's a less chance of CO2 being emitted into the air. That would help save their homes and their businesses along the coast because of the reduction of the rising sea levels. With the businesses being saved, that creates tourism along the coast and helps improve their economy. This economy would then provide jobs for others along the coast and continue to affect the Venezuelan economy as a whole.